Welcome back to Autoimmune Adventures. If you're living with an autoimmune disease, you already know this truth that managing your health can feel like a full-time job. Between lab work, medications, appointments, insurance, symptom tracking, and trying to remember what you wanted to ask your doctor, it can become overwhelming very fast. And for many of us, there comes a moment when we realize something hard. The healthcare system wasn't really designed for people managing complex, multiple chronic conditions, especially long-term. And so today's episode is about what happens when frustration of that type turns into innovation. And we're joined by George and Mara Saldana. George is the founder of Ethia, a health tracking platform built after years of walking along the side of his wife, Mara, through her Crohn's journey, failed biologics, endless appointments, and the emotional weight of navigating all of the things. Mara is going to share her story, and they are both going to walk us through how they use the platform in real life and how you yourself can get on and start using this platform. So this conversation is about empowerment, about being prepared, and about changing the tone of your doctor visits. And we are excited to get into this. So let's go ahead. We're happy to have you here, George and Mara.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah. All right. We really want to start with your story because then people will understand and have context. Can you take us back to the beginning of your Crohn's journey? What were those early years like?
Oh, I could walk you all the way back to the dark ages. When I was a little girl, I remember probably like 8, 9, or 10 years old, having blood in the toilet, going to get my mom and trying to figure out the things. And that landed us at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, where I received an IBD diagnosis. And I remember being a little girl sitting in a giant auditorium watching a video of this is like the introduction to what IBD is, and getting my first colonoscopy and drinking the yummy drinks, and getting then on a maintenance drug, low-level sulfasalazine, and that kicked me into remission. Luckily, I had very mild symptoms at the time, and really required just an annual follow-up, not much after that. Then fast forward decades later comes the pandemic, and our bodies and our brains are under so much stress, and I hadn't done any maintenance. I hadn't had any flares that I knew of through all of the years. And here I find myself in my 40s breaking. I had OB issues. I had upper endoscopy issues, and I had GI issues. And I knew something was wrong. But with all of these things going on, it was so hard to isolate, like, what's the issue? So I go to this specialist, that specialist, and the other specialist. And in the course of a week, I had 2 surgeries and a colonoscopy to sort all of these things out, and came out with a diagnosis of the, I think they said ulcerative colitis at the time. And they put me on ulcerative colitis maintenance medicine to try and steroids to try and get that flare kicked into remission. That was years ago. I still haven't stabilized in any type of remission state. Biologics have put me into a tailspin, or I'm not sure if they're really working. We just kind of get stuck in these constant loops. So we have created Ethia. George created Ethia, and that kind of helped me. I've been managed ADHD brain, but I knew the trends, but I didn't know how to talk about the issues that were these trends. I was methodical with my diet and remembering it and being able to tie my symptoms back to this or that thing, but that wouldn't stay with me for a week or 2 weeks or a month, long enough to be able to craft a story that I can tell to a doctor or a provider. And then I'm getting all these labs drawn, and that's going into one app. And then I see my primary doctor when I have acute symptoms like migraines to try and get that migraine issue fixed. But is that migraine tied to my Crohn's? just having all of these day-to-day mini crises that put me in the seat of being in a waiting room somewhere and needing to prevent that and needing to stop whatever it is that's causing me to end up there. I needed a line of sight. And now we have the amazing gift of technology in our world, this AI that can help us and be the bridge between us and our provider, us and the clinical data. And then also be able to have a system that can say, I see that you didn't get a lot of really good sleep the last week. I see that you switched your medication, or you added a vitamin supplement, or that maybe you added a vitamin supplement and now you're in the too high sugar zone, even though you're in the right zone for this particular supplement that might assist with your symptoms. So just sort of having that central point of view has given me peace of mind back and helped me to control a little better quality of life having Crohn's now.
I love this. So I am a woman in my 40s as well, and my brain has gone to shit. And so trying to remember all of the things, all of the medications and all of the appointments and all of the labs and all of the trends and the diet, trying to remember all of that is a immense task to ask of ourselves, I think. So you had mentioned failed biologics and like constant appointments. That's something that our listeners are going to identify with. They're going to understand that. At what point did you start feeling like the system really isn't built for somebody managing something so complex?
That's a great question. That's a big one.
I'll start with the first biologic. It was April 26th last year. No, it was 2 years ago. And I went in for my first infusion, and it was like a TNF biologic. And our bodies are, molecularly different from the next person. So everything we do to ourselves, we're the lab rats. And my arm started itching after the first infusion, and I was like, okay, did the doctor tell me to take a Benadryl or to take a Zyrtec or Claritin or anything beforehand? No. They just were like, just drink lots of water, you'll be fine. Okay. I'm not fine. I'm in the hospital now. It's been 24 hours. I'm seeing stars. For 2 weeks after this biologic, I couldn't speak full sentences. When I texted or typed, it was phonetic. It wasn't even spelled correctly. Very fascinating, but not the lab rat experience I wanted. And I mean, it was an acute reaction, an acute adverse reaction to that biologic. And I wanted it out of my system. And it took a month. People were like, we're not going to do the plasma, whatever, to get it out of insurance. Isn't going to rinse this out of your system. You have to just suffer it out and hope that neurologically you come out of this and physically you come out of this A-okay.
Hope that you come out of it neurologically okay?
Because like what these mechanisms are triggering a neurological response that because it was a systemic biologic that I was using, and it was interacting with mechanisms that interacted and activated for me through my nervous system to my neurons, blockers that weren't normal. My coworkers were like, what was going on with you that week?
And the interesting thing is that it started with the GI for the infusion, but then 2 weeks later, we're looking for a neurologist that's competent enough to have this conversation, because now all of a sudden, one doctor's like, yeah, it's typical, it's not that big of a deal. And the other doctor's like, oh, well, wait a second, I'm not sure. What are the GI correlations? So now we're going to 2 doctors trying to find the right one. And now it's somewhere between one and the other. And the responses they're not working together, right? There's 2 versions of what they're seeing. And she's battling, like she said, stars and neurological. Lupus might have even come up in conversation.
Yeah,
All of
my
a sudden, that's not activated.
my antibodies were up like through the roof. So I've actually had like what's it called? A medical, like medicine induced lupus.
Oh my God.
So now, and then that's the 2 specialists, but then there's also the primary, and then there's the ER. So now you
Primary
got
is awesome.
4 different versions, and then there's the actual symptoms that she's battling through that are a bit more acute, not as a result of a biologic necessarily, but just part of the Crohn's still being activated and going through.
Yeah,
what
it's
it
not
goes.
stressful at all.
So now you've got another layer, and you're thinking, how do we, 1, work that out, and 2, like live a normal life? You know, all the rest of life's challenges still exist, right? And then you've got this sort of layer sitting on top. That was the first biologic.
That's really messy. It's really messy. And when you're working with so many different doctors and you're receiving so much information, differing information, sometimes conflicting information from these doctors, you like what is somebody supposed to do with all this?
Everyone's
just-
like, oh, so you're gonna do it, right?
Right. You're just and we know how long it takes to get into some specialists. We know how long it takes to get work done. We know how long it takes to find a treatment plan that's going to work for you. So it might be just a little off topic, but I have to bring it up because you would be the perfect person to use as an example. My sisters and I have a dream that we're going to open an autoimmune center, and it is going to have all the doctors in one place. And for somebody like yourself, those doctors would be together in a meeting, looking at your chart and your issues, your symptoms, your labs, and they would convene. They would meet with each other and talk about you.
Yeah.
And all in one place at one time, so that they're treating your body as a whole and not like, okay, I'll treat this symptom, you treat that system, I'll treat that system, on and on. And then you as the patient are like, what? So that is our dream. And I feel like you would be the perfect person to use as an example for that, like how that would benefit you.
Absolutely.
We would have on-site labs. We have genetic testing. This is something that there's nothing like this out there.
There isn't. I had George actually found a neurologist that was able to get me in the soonest. And that neurologist belonged to a practice that was a specialty practice. They had rheumatologists, they had gastroenterology, they had cardiology. I know it's a unicorn practice. This does not exist in most places. And at the time, I was at the end of my rope with the provider that I had first started this journey with. And when I did get into the neurologist, very quickly, I might add, I was then able to get into a GI doctor at that practice that took a look at all of the documentation at that first meet and greet appointment. And he said, they've been treating you for ulcerative colitis, but everything clinically here says that you have Crohn's. I'm going to need to do a colonoscopy and confirm if you have Crohn's. So, or ulcerative colitis before we begin treatment. And, the classic panel of that IBD and inflammation, CBC, everything, blood work.
Yeah.
And it is that provider just retired. So my heart is broken. So I'm kind of just, adjusting to a new GI doctor at this moment in time, but in that same sort of practice. What they are missing is the mission statement, Alyssa, that you and your sisters have, is that in service of the patient. It's great to have all of these providers in the hub, and I am so blessed, but they're still not talking to each other. My father, who I call him the father of clinical data, he back when computers took whole entire rooms and pharmaceutical companies were collecting clinical data, he was one of those people helping to manage it and get into computers and studies for the very first time. And he and my mother worked in hospital settings quite a bit. Now, as I'm starting this journey and that challenge that your solution would solve for, uniting all of the providers under one roof, they used to have that before technology. When my grandfather, who was diagnosed with Crohn's in 1970, he was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 1970. When his diagnosis came through, the VA would have the GI doctor, the neurologist, the cardiologist, the immunologist. Everyone would have a meeting to talk about their shared patients on a stand-up, on a regular basis. I can't remember what the name was for it, but then my dad said, but he'll remember. They used to do that.
They had to. They had to, because they didn't have fax machines yet. They didn't have digital records. I mean, it was either that or you send paper photocopies they had to. And ironically, here we are with all this lovely technology, and somehow the problem still exists. So,
which is why we're excited that you have created what you've created, because technology should be empowering, and it hasn't been for the last 40 years, 45, 50 years, however many, maybe we're approaching 60 years at this point. I don't even know, but it's been a while since people have been able to use technology in a way that is going to be beneficial for these complicated scenarios like what all of us have, because all of us on this call have had complicated scenarios, including George. So here we are.
Yeah, and it was interesting though, the mention you brought up biologic, and Mara mentioned the first round. There was another round, but the question that came to me was, well, why that one? Right? There's multiple biologics available for that specific condition, right? And Mara had said something interesting, which is on a molecular basis, we are all different, but they'll still say Crohn's, right? So if all 5 of us here have Crohn's, and they say, oh, well, here's your Crohn's diagnosis. But then, well, which biologic, which treatment, what works, and how do you know? When we looked at the first biologic, it's not cheap, right? I mean, there's classifications and billing and codes and stuff that, as a patient, you're sort of responsible for navigating, which is a lot.
And some you get with Medicare, and some you don't.
Absolutely. And we went through an exercise where that was sobering, where if you get that wrong, you might be mortgaging a house to get this treatment that may work, but it's not guaranteed.
Oh yeah,
right? And
benefits renewal time period, or like, is this on the specialty drug list or not?
Right. So, and then it might just be one code change, and so we just made a mistake. It was a 3 out of 4, which means it's actually covered versus it's actually $80,000. Right? There's a big difference between that little coding change. But then here comes the second biologic we're going to try. And as her partner, as a support staff here, I think, well, why that one, right? You missed the first one. Why is the second one the right one? Why not the other 5 that are available? And it's like, well, but it's not the first one because we don't want that. And so the second round, it was actually one of the catalysts that made me think about a different approach, where EPS started coming up, right? After all these experiences, there was a concept called precision medicine. And I learned about this thing, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting, just those 2 words. And then I dug into it, and I learned more that like oncology has some applications that are similar to this, where they really look at the body, not the condition, but the body itself. So these pathways, these things are activated, or these signs that this treatment in this specific condition in this specific patient, this is the right path. And I thought, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that in Crohn's? Right? Why not? Well, listen,
the providers should be.
There should be discussions, right? There should be a better way. It exists somewhere. Why not everywhere, right? Like so you mentioned, having multiple doctors look at it, having people really think through that. And I wondered, well, are we really applying all this knowledge from somebody in the other room down the hall to the patient that's just in this other room, right? Slightly different diagnosis. How can we take a lab, a specialty lab, pull that blood sample and really see what's out there, really pull it out, right? I mean, there's so many different treatments out there. So ETHIA started out as sort of that precision medicine approach. Was if I took Mara's blood sample and I found a specialty lab, could I uncover something that would really point her in the best treatment path, right? Is that biologic wrong, or is there that's right? How do I, as a patient, how do we evaluate these things for the right path, right? Without having Mara go through the neurological outcomes and all those things that we had to battle through. And then I learned, and we had conversations with specialty labs, and we talked to primary doctors, and it's like there's a whole adoption from the medical community that has to happen before they go and kind of think through this. There's pros and cons. And then I think, well, you know what? Actually, the majority of our struggle, yes, the biologic was awful, right? And getting that wrong was terrible. But between the doctor appointments, let's just call it life, between the ER visits, the doctor appointments, the specialists, there's that life that we have to somehow manage ourselves. That's our responsibility as patients. Stacey, you said you got a folder, I've got a folder, and somehow we as patients sort of have to make sense, because can we really expect a doctor? Let's just be honest. You've got a 30-minute window at best. You go in, they, hey, how you doing? You say your 5-minute spiel, they turn around, they try to catch up on patient 1001 that day and look through their computer of all the notes, and then come back and try to hit a bullseye. And I don't think it works for either side, right? I don't think it's fair for them, and I don't think it's fair for us. And yet here we go, and that's sort of what we have. And I thought maybe there's a way we take that folder of history, of labs, of ER, of all the feelings, right? The check-ins every day that we all have naturally. We wake up and how are we doing today, right? How do I feel? How's my mood? How's my body? And maybe you feel terrible, but in another 100 days of feeling up and down, are you really going to remember the correlation between you felt good, but you also had a Twizzler and red number 40 was, or whatever that was, and you don't really think of all those things that actually may happen? There's no chance that I'm going to remember. My memory is terrible. Will the doctor really think that's valid? Maybe.
Well, they might think it, but they might not say it because, it's not clinically observed that could be wrong. Like, I feel like the providers hold back from us because they're afraid of liability or risk in the conversation, and they're comfortable with their conversational safety of what
I think that's absolutely true. So here's the part we're excited about. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I think our listeners is going to relate to this 100%, honestly. But we're excited to offer them what you've come to show us. Can we jump into the demo?
Oh, yeah.
Demo? Yeah. We would love to do that.
What browser? So I have just logged into ETHIA, and this is my username, Crony Muse. So ETHIA's main point here is to have like sort of a home-based dashboard. This is a browser-based tool, so that when I come home from my appointments, I can just log into my charts, download, upload, and centralize my files right here. But first, how are you feeling? Let me track. Well, today I am feeling okay. My symptoms aren't that severe, but I feel pretty awful. Some more detail. My energy level, it's always exhausted. Pain level today, not so bad right now. Mood, I am loving this moment right now. How well did I sleep? I'm going to say terribly, but I did set my alarm for the eclipse this morning. So there was that. Diet, food log. I'm actually currently on a liquid diet for breakfast. I had a vanilla shake.
And just to be clear, funny enough, the diet food log, I actually had a conversation with a Crohn's Colitis Foundation, and in the talk they said this would be amazing. So section 3 and section 4, which is right below. Yes,
I'm not going to log it.
That's the reality, but it's the reality of people's lives, and some of this, even as caregivers. And I'll take a small side note is that Mara's an adult and we have children. But if the roles were reversed and we were older and our children were younger, I built in a caregiver function in here so that they can also help their caregivers. So I can, as a patient, have multiple caregivers of my own, and I can be a caregiver of multiple patients.
So George could be my caregiver, as well as I can just also be in here too, for children as well.
So as a caregiver, So as a caregiver, I would have access to see it, but I would be able to use there's an Ask AI function there because that's Mara's partner, I'd be curious to ask questions on her health without having to change her labs or medications. I'm just curious if my own questions to AI, like, what am I supposed to do? What do I think about this? And maybe just go off into my own tangents without affecting her chats. Because when she runs her reports on her chats, it's for her. And when I run a report, it's really for me because I've been asking these questions and all the different things. So I can see my version of hers and she can see her version of hers and we can share back and forth, etc.
I just
can
have
see-
to step in and say that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, I can see how that is just such an amazing feature, because whether it is you're taking care of your spouse, you're taking care of your elderly parent, or you're taking care of your child who is sick, who needs help, who's got their own stuff, like this is just fantastic.
There was something interesting that came up, and I was speaking to a patient foundation in Canada, and it was for Crohn's related. And the way they mentioned that the Canadian process, because it's sort of like a government-based thing for adolescents and for the pediatric population, is different. They have a certain hospital they go to, and when they become 18, they go to a different process to be cared for. And there's a lot of difficulties going from one process to the other. They just sort of drop off. They don't continue with that level of care because there's a different level of responsibility. So as caregivers, it's almost like, what can I do to help my child navigate through there? And that kind of came up in these conversations. So sorry.
No, it's all good. So I'll start some more on some of the navigating. So there are some key tools here that I want to make sure that we touch on. One is work with your care team and engage. So what about visiting a prep report? So I don't know about you, baby, but usually I've got 10,000 things on my mind, and getting myself to that place of calm where I can get my thoughts sorted and know what it is that I want to tell my provider when I'm there. What is important? What's that thing from 18 days ago that happened that I was like, I gotta make sure I let them know that this weird thing happened or this cause and effect. I can put that into my notes and on my days check in that day. And now I can get a prep brief for, oh my goodness, I don't have to remember. That stress now is off my shoulders when I get to the doctor or before leaving for it. I can just do a PDF here of all the things that I want to support. And then very quickly, it just produces this write-up.
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. So good.
My demo version. So yeah, it'll say like, these are, I hit a new record with my calprotectin. So current people will appreciate that.
And just to be clear on what you're seeing, the way I built the platform for us was to pull out the things that they're remarkably
different than the regular.
So you won't see
range.
She may have 1,000 labs in there and thousands of markers. The ones I pull that the platform pulls out are the ones that are really high or significant for some reason to call out. So they're out of the range or they're correlated to a feeling that happens that really says, there's something here that maybe we weren't thinking about or maybe call attention to by a medical professional. So a lot of this isn't to replace a doctor. It's really to empower the patient to have a better conversation with their medical provider. And hopefully it changes the trajectory to something more positive, right? Just, hey man, if we got 5 minutes, let's get to the valuable stuff. And then let's make sure, because I'm going to hold you accountable, right? And part of this, we as patients are left figuring this one out, right? I mean, like I did Dr. Google for a long time. And honestly, I think a lot of this, I want to make sure that the patient and doctor share this and the doctor recognizes, they're going to come with a lot of information and it's on me to do my thing, right? Like I'm trained in this thing and I want the patient to feel like follow-up appointment. Doctor said, call them in 2 weeks if symptoms don't change. You get an alert in the platform, call your doctor, use that, right? Don't forget that exists. And a doctor should also expect that is now the patient's going to come back to me in 2 weeks and I need to not think about this. I need this next time I see.
We talk a lot about the importance of remembering that we can respect our doctor, but it does not change the fact that we pay them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
If they are providing us a service, and as such, customer service should be part of the experience. And if it isn't, it's time to find a new doctor. And if it isn't, it's time to say things and advocate for yourself and step out and say, hey, I know you have a short amount of time with me. I want to be respectful of your time. These are the things I need to have answers to.
Yep.
Boom, boom, boom.
All right, we've got over
You
here.
want to go to track?
I'll
Oh, okay.
yeah, I've
Sorry.
got my Google script ready. Here we go. I think that the discover part is great. And we're going to work our way back to the next tab real quickly. But this dashboard basically takes all of your inputs, all of the visits that happen in various different silos, different providers and networks. Now you have a combined view that tells you what your current flare risk is, what sorry, new feature here. What your current flare view is, and then can I do health timeline?
You should. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And see how the trend has been. We've got symptom check-in, feeling good, green, lab results, markers, flag. And you can get that perspective of all of these inputs. Okay, here are my labs. I've got loaded. In these labs, it's scanning for markers. Markers meaning something that goes either up or down and needs to be in a certain way. When it's up, it's a marker that activates something that you probably don't want, or if it's too low, it's activating something else that you probably don't want. Let's go back here. What?
No, I'm going to try.
The track
Yeah.
and the correlation view.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this view will actually take your markers that are north or south a certain way and tell you how it's going to affect your system, your correlation. And
So-
you can see how the activity of your lab overlays your symptoms.
So on the right side, just to draw your attention, there's the abnormality. So is it severe, moderate, mild? How are you feeling? And then the dates. Now, this is my attempt to try to see a visual when we have emotions, and unfortunately, professionally, there's an emotional response and then there's a data response. And I'm trying to find, from my view, if was she feeling bad and was there a lab that was also up high? Just because the red might be she's feeling bad, does some line or some dot fall above in that severity? And this is where I welcome any feedback from patients to say, there's a way I want to see this differently. So just honestly, I always put it out there is that I take a chance at this from my perspective, but again, 99% of this was built for Mara and patients and for all of us. So it's like, how can I actually look at this and see that this is something I need to think about? Out of all the other things that we've done, we've talked about, we looked at a visual, easy chart to say, oh, okay, that's where these things meet, right? That's where this thing crosses paths.
Okay, listeners, are you hearing this? Because this gentleman just said he wants your feedback.
Yes.
He wants your feedback on how to make this app or this service be better.
Yeah.
That's a really rare thing to hear from somebody who is offering something like this. Like usually this is what you get. You figure out how to use it. Good luck. But George is saying this is built to be used. It needs to be. I mean,
yeah.
We want to hear how you can use it, how we can change it to make it more useful to you. There are so many things you can do with Ethia. It's blowing my mind right now. Because when Stacy showed it to me initially, I was like, oh, it's just tracking stuff. It is so much more than that. It is so much more than that. This is a comprehensive tool. And I don't think it's a bad thing that it's based off of Mara's health history, because having Crohn's, obviously there's a lot of GI issues going on. GI issues, anybody who's fighting with autoimmunity is going to have GI issues, whether they have the symptoms of it or not.
It all starts there.
Yes. And so having the tools that you already have in there, that's just going to bring pieces together that maybe others, I mean, there's still people that don't talk about the gut brain connection. We know it's there. We know it is real. There are still a lot of doctors that won't talk to that. So I love that you have utilized AI for this. I have loved that you have utilized compiling everything in one place, making it easy to hand over to a doctor as you walk in. Like, this is blowing my mind. I love this so much.
Thank you.
As we need to wrap up here. As we're wrapping up, we want you guys to tell our listeners how they can learn more about Ethia. Where should they start?
Well, so just 1 second. So one of the first things is ethia.io, right? You can see it in the top of the screen, ethia.io. You can go there, you can register, and please go to the site, play around with it, try to break it, make it work for you. If you have suggestions, please feed it through. I'm more than happy. Actually, I'm asking, begging, please be engaged and let's make something that actually works for us. And as you can see from this first screen here, this is where I hope we feel comfortable saying, these are my labs, this is how I'm feeling, these are my doctor appointments. And this whole file here is where you can kind of put, there's like a 5-page questionnaire in there. This sort of describes your history of biologics, your history of what you've been feeling and who you are, the profile. And I think there's 13 or 14 different autoimmune conditions that the platform is built for. So each one of those, when you actually complete this health profile, should become unique to your specific condition. So I've got Hashimoto's and my wife has Crohn's. So my questions will be specific to me, hers will be specific to hers. And if I've got 4 versions of, the question specific to the 4 things I've got, right? So this should be, when you come here, it should be supportive of who you are, right? As individualized or as complex as we all are, it should be there. And you mentioned something about, all the different doctors and compiling it. I built this Ask AI function, if you can scroll up, because that standardized level of care, a doctor is not a doctor, is not a doctor, right? Not every one of those will give you the same level of responses, of experience, of compassion for what you're going through. And this may not give you that much compassion, but the way I've built this, and I've tried to, is to not replace a doctor, but to empower us to say, can I get more information? Can I get a more standardized? AI is great. It's not the answer fully yet. Maybe it will be one day, but right now it's an empowering tool to start asking questions. Instead of searching on the Wild West of Google or the internet, at least now it's taking into consideration your background, your labs, your markers, your check-ins, your feelings, your diet, and saying, okay, let me ask questions as if I have all that in there, and this thing will do that for you. A little bit more standardized. So please, like you guys have been all saying, thank you so much. And, sign up, register. If it breaks, let me know, I'll fix it. Please try to break it. Please make it as unique and personalized as possible. And that's what I'm hoping this will do for everybody else. All your listeners can have the free plan, right? So I can put this on the back end. So if your listeners are saying, hey, I really want the free plan, just send me a note and you'll see I don't need first name, last name. This is all HIPAA compliant, right? So I don't want to know personal information. An email would be sufficient or a username would be sufficient. Say, hey, I registered, I've got the free plan, but I'm a listener of the show, of your podcast, and I'd like to explore all the features. Okay, no problem.
Okay. That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have loved this conversation. It's just so much. It reminds us of something that we talk about a lot, which is empowerment doesn't mean that we have to do everything by ourselves. And I love that so much. It means that you have tools. It means that you walk into the room prepared. It means that your story is backed by data, not dismissed by emotion. And for so many of us living with autoimmune disease, that's the most exhausting part. It isn't just the symptoms, it's that mental load of trying to keep track of absolutely everything and feeling like if we've dropped the ball, no one is going to be able to keep track of us. And that's frustrating and hard. So what I love about this story is that it started in frustration and in watching someone that you loved struggle. And instead of accepting the system as it was, you built something to make it work better.
Yeah.
So I love that the two of you did this. It's amazing. If you've ever walked out of an appointment wishing that you had said something differently, or if you've ever forgotten a symptom until after you left the doctor's office, or if you've ever felt dismissed because you couldn't prove what you were feeling, this episode is your reminder that experience matters, your data matters, and you deserve support. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us and sharing not just a platform, but your story. We love the stories.
Thank you so much.
And for all of our listeners out there, remember, you are worthy of joy. Disease does not define your life. You do.